When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of EPL Market Matrix. Ladies and gents, there's moves happening, isn't there? There's stuff actually going on now. There's rumours galore. There's PSR clubs doing deal. And here to talk about it all, to walk through a few of the sort of headlines, whether that'll happen or not, we'll see. We'll share our thoughts as ever. Is Ben Bocsak. Ben, how are we?
Yeah, I'm all good. Just came back from Germany. Got a bit of a taste of the Euros there in Munich and Stuttgart, with some really good atmospheres and a really good game to watch as well. The Hungary-Scotland game. I mean, let's be honest, it wasn't a great game, but the way it ended, obviously being Hungarian, was great for me.
Yeah, the drama at the end. And you said you had a good time, so we'll know you stayed well away from the England games by all accounts then. But yeah, the Euros, the Copa America, they're underway. So they are kind of derailing a little bit of transfer activity, people. But at the same time, there is stuff happening. There's definitely moves. Things are getting done. So we'll get into a few with this one, Ben. Probably some of the, I'd say, the higher profile moves. And one that we'll start on that, this one looked nail on, didn't it, on Friday? Everyone was expecting this to happen. It looks like there might be a pause, maybe uncertain. Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I mean, this broke, Ben, last Friday that, yeah, this was going to get done. Newcastle moved for him, a year left on his deal. Everton had stopped all talks for a 27-year-old. And he was thinking, yeah, you get this, FFP, and there was even talk, which we'll get into, about a player moving the other way. Then all of a sudden, he seems to have collapse, might be too strong a word because we're a bit uncertain, but it seems to have stopped. We can at least say that. I mean, we'll run the metrics like normal. Calvert-Lewin's an interesting one, Ben, because some people say to me, this is a really good player, and I say, based on what? And that's not trying to be derogatory towards the player. I'm just struggling to remember sort of too many 20-goal-a-season stats, put it that way, but we shouldn't just dismiss him on that. What do the metrics say about Dominic Calvert-Lewin?
I mean, if we're looking at his underlying numbers, his non-penalty XG, 0.47 per 90, considering he was playing for Everton, like, those are really good numbers in an Everton team for a striker. However, this is when we run into trouble when we actually look at his actual output. That's 0.21 per 90. So, massive underperformance. Then I looked at his goal conversion as well. Just over 10%, which is actually lower than Darwin Núñez. It's one of the worst out of forwards in the Premier League.
Wow.
Again, that is a red flag when it comes to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It means he's not really putting his chances away. He's not a good finisher. That's what the numbers would suggest, and that's not really what you want from a striker. So, yeah, even though his XG would suggest he's getting in the right positions, he's not really putting those chances away. The one sort of plus side, the benefit I could find to him is he's a tall player, he's a big player, and very good in the air. I think he wins almost 6 aerial duels per 90, which is a lot per game. I mean, it probably has something to do with Sean Dyche and the way Everton play. I mean, that definitely plays a role, but he's a strong unit and he's difficult to beat in the air.
It's strange, isn't it? Because you look and you hear those stats and you're thinking, there's no way he's going in the team for anyone like Isaac. But with the likes suspected of Callum Wilson maybe set to move on as a solid backup forward and even an alternative, you could say, then a real aerial threat, because Newcastle can cross the ball. They have got a few players that can whip it in like Trippier. maybe there's an option there. I mean, Ben, the fees mentioned are interesting because the suggestion was at first, and we'll talk about the player it was linked to short, but the Everton were valuing him about 35 million with a year left to go, and Newcastle 25 closer. So it's not the biggest gap in the world, but when we're talking these amounts and the clubs involved with PSR, there is a gap to bridge there. 25, 35. Where are you steering your yardstick on in this market and for this player?
We've got to be realistic, and we've got to talk about Jonathan David in a minute, who is, I think his price tag is around 30 million. So if you're comparing it to Jonathan David, like even 25 million at this point, based on the season he's had, would be a little bit of overpaying for him, really, considering he's 27 years old. So for me, 35 million is way too high, even in this market. 25 million is definitely more realistic. But if I was Newcastle, I'd be looking elsewhere, because I think there's better value in the market for the price tag that they value him at.
Yeah, I mean, even you say you're looking at that conversion rate, especially for his metrics. Yes, someone's going to say there's English tax involved in that, and I get that, to speak, but in terms of a deal that kind of felt like it had the need to satisfy PSR as well more than anything, maybe this is why Newcastle have just taken that step back when they've looked at it all together. And probably when they've looked at it all together, I mean, Ben, let's put this into context. We talked about this player, Yankuba Minte, as a player with real potential. The suggestion was at one point that Calvert-Lewin to Newcastle and Minte going the other way, yes, as separate deals, but clearly interlinked for PSR, FFP. Surely this is the bit where Newcastle have maybe just looked at the metrics and thought, hold on, this doesn't quite stack up, especially if Minte was going to go the other way.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Minte, and obviously we talked about how impressive his stats have been in the Eredivisie, how good his form was towards the end of last season, and I think he's a talent that deserves a better home than Everton, for sure. Obviously, still question marks for whether he can do it in the Premier League, but he's got really exciting potential, and I think he deserves to play for an attacking team that appreciates his sort of value.
Yeah, it just seemed quite crazy in that regard as well. I mean, I know Newcastle are talking about getting rid of Callum Wilson, who I get is 32, and I know Calvert-Lewin is a lot younger, 27, but just even on pure paper now, I think most clubs would probably take or back Wilson to get more goals in the Premier League than Calvert-Lewin. So we'll see what happens with this one. If it does pick back up, or there is a part of us, I think we'll both agree there, Newcastle may just have seen sense in terms of the value of the deal there. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. And we might as well jump to this player, because I think it's right to, because we're talking strikers here to start with. Jonathan David. I mean, there's quite a few clubs linked with this, Ben. I mean, Lille have come out and said, haven't they, the Lille president, that Yoro and Jonathan David, they've both got a year left to go on the deal, so they're going to go. We can't afford to let them go on a free. It's now a case of haggling. As you said, you read quite a few reports that around 30 million, somewhere between 25 to 30. Chelsea are rumoured to be in the mix. Spurs are also there. Even United, quite a few outlets have got linked to this player. It's always one of them, Ben, that's mentioned for a long time, but it's just never happened, has it really, that move from Ligue 1 and Lille to the Premier League? I mean, a year left to go, around 30 million with our yardstick. Can you make the metrics add up for that?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. I think the reason he hasn't gotten that move yet, his goal scoring is really impressive, but he doesn't do much else apart from, score goals. He actually doesn't really get involved in build-up play too much, doesn't attempt many take-ons, just averages 20 passes per game, which even forward is really low. So in that sense, I can see why none of the big clubs have gone for him, because he's very much just a finisher. He's very good inside the box, and the numbers reflect that, 0.58 goals per 90, 0.51 XG, so slightly performance, but not by a lot. He's in the top 5 forwards for goal conversion as well, with 25%.
Nice.
He is someone who is great inside the box. If a team needs a finisher, just someone who won't drop back as much, won't really get involved in the build-up and things, but he'll arrive in the box, he'll find space in the box, then Jonathan David is your man. And I think for 25-30 million, he is a bargain, really, based on the numbers he's been posting regularly in the
Crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's when you hear that, if you just take that goal scoring element, like the chance conversion, 25%, like you said, even the XG around 0.51, those stand up. And Liga, still, I know it's lower than the Premier League, but it's still a good league at the same time. You just wonder, is a team's put off by the fact is, and we shouldn't just dismiss this because it's the hardest thing in football to put the ball in the net, isn't it, really? But he does have the feel of just the goal scorer in simple terms, which I know it isn't. Do you think that's it, Ben? Do you think that's why the likes of United, Chelsea clearly have him on their radar? He's a player that's continuously linked to. Wouldn't surprise us if someone like them, Spurs, took the plunge. Do you think that's it, though? It's because he just offers that and solely nothing else in the team play. That's why he's maybe on the list, but not top of it for them.
I think so. I mean, I've got to point out, he's off the ball work, he's quite good as well. So the average is quite high for recoveries and stuff like that for forwards. So he does contribute in the defensive side of things. I think that's why he was linked with Liverpool way back before they got Diego Jota. So obviously I think that is a factor that will increase his metrics and his overall thing. But yeah, I think the fact that he doesn't offer too much from the ball, it will be a concern. And I think before, the sort of prices that were touted for him, maybe even last year, was 60 million. At 60 million, you're not really going to go for it, even at 50 for what he offers. However, now with his price tag being so low, and he's still relatively young as well, he's just turned 24 in January, if I'm correct. So, he's still yet to enter his prime, you would say. He's still got a couple of years to really be at the top of his game. I think at that price right now, the teams that you mentioned, those teams who are looking for another forward will sort of be like, you know what, it's worth a punt. It's worth a risk. I think in this market, that's not that much money, and actually he does have a lot of things that we like. The pressing, the goal scoring, the finishing, and that is one of the hardest things in football. So, I think you can have someone extremely impressive on the ball, do all the skills in the world and contribute so much going forward. But if they don't have the output as an attacker, if they don't have that output, then they'll never be seen as a sort of elite forward. And David has that, at least. So, everything else, I think, based on a different system, could probably be enhanced. I mean, he's never going to be like Nkunku or Roberto Firmino type of form, but he can still improve it in that side of things. So, for me, I think right now in this market, this is one definitely to explore for clubs looking for a striker.
Yeah, there is a lot to like. There's no two ways about it. And he's been scored the other night for Canada with a lovely finish as well. So he's away with his country. So it's not going to be instant by any means. But I think we're probably together on this, Ben. Full expectation, or would be quite surprised if it's not the Premier League that Jonathan David ends up, because of the fee, because of the amount. You probably expect someone like a Spurs, a Chelsea, United, someone to take it's a lower risk at that fee, 25 to 30. It's got a Premier League lower risk gamble rate on it, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I think maybe the only club I could have thought might go for it is RB Leipzig, because if Sesko was to leave, but obviously that never happened. So I can't really see them going for it, and I can't really see any other club going for it either.
Yeah, fully expect that. So Calvert-Lewin staying put. We expect Jonathan David coming to the Premier League. So we talked an English forward, we talked a Canadian forward. Let's go Dutch on this one, Ben. Joshua Zirkzee. Now, there's a lot of talk about this. And when I say a lot of talk, you've even had journalists, as you know, like David Ornstein say, Manchester United especially, are very interested in these, are in discussions with him. That's fully known. AC Milan looked nailed on for this at one point, didn't they, to trigger that release clause, €40 million, so translates around £32 million, depending on how well you get euros at Tesco, that type of thing. There is another fee rumoured that will come into as well. I mean, on paper, quite young again, 23, done well for Bologna, Serie A, so got a lot to show, had a pedigree, been at Bayern Munich, that type of thing. Do the metrics back up the headlines, though, Ben?
He's kind of an opposite to David. So he spoke about, someone who is just a pure finisher and doesn't really get involved. Zirkzee, you look at him on paper, 6'4" striker.
Yeah.
Okay, he's a target man. He's just, there to. That's what how you would profile him. And if you were to just look at his physique. However, if you watch him play, he actually profiles more as a false nine. He'll drop back a lot. For FBref, he's in the 89th percentile for successful take-ons. So he's taking players on. He's very technically gifted. I think I compare him a little bit to actually Roberto Firmino. He's got that sort of ability to drop deep, and it's really impressive for being so.
Yeah.
And I think you can see why there are so many clubs interested in him. His output is not the greatest. 13.5 goal conversion. 13.5% goal conversion last season. It's not great. Let's be honest. You'd want 15. So it's a slight underperformance. And for a striker, actually, if you're a number 9, you'd be wanting at least 20-25% if you're playing for a big club anyway. So it's not the greatest, but he does have a lot of things that you like about him, and he is still very young. And I think because of that, there is a lot of potential there, and he is an exciting player, and he was part of a really exciting Bologna team that obviously qualified for the Champions season. So he's fun to watch. I was surprised that he was actually initially in the Dutch squad actually for the Euros, but I think because of a couple of injuries we had to sort of pull out, and I was excited to see him at the tournament, although he hasn't sort of featured a lot so far. I think it would have been nice to see him sort of link up with Gakpo and Xavi Simons, and I think that is a really exciting sort of future front three for the Netherlands. And obviously, I think Gakpo is sort of ahead of all of them. He's already at big, but I'm expecting Simons and Zirkzee as well to move on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you say, because he did so well under Motta at Bologna. They were exciting side. Maybe Erik ten Hag didn't quite have that same scintillating season, I think it's fair to say, in that regard. Now, the one thing that's interesting, Ben, because we talked about market value, and it doesn't seem bad. €40 million translates to about 32.5 million sterling, so it doesn't look too bad. The thing that goes alongside it, this is a lot of where the suggestions are Milan have been put on, or there's been difficulties with the clubs. His agent, Kia Jubarashin, asking for a commission fee of around £8 million, which translates to about 10-11 million euros. I mean, that's a huge chunk of change. So that, if you just add that on, that's nice and easy. It takes his value or his transfer fee overall with everything in to 40 million. Can you make that work? Does that seem fair, or does that seem north of what you're thinking?
It's a tough ask because he is a striker, and at the end of the day, judge strikers on goals. He hasn't shown that he's productive enough, I think, for me. But then again, I was such a big fan of Roberto Firmino, and his output was never fantastic, but he offered so much else. And I think with Zirkzee, especially in Bournemouth's system, he offered so much else that you can make a case for him in the right system to be worth that £40 million. But the club who buys him has to be sure, has to be certain that, he is the perfect player for that system.
Yeah.
There's a lot of clubs that are interested in, for example, AC Milan, where I didn't really see how he would fit in, how they would sort of accommodate him. I think I kind of see that with Manchester United as well. I don't know where he would fit in. They've got Højlund, so they want him to play like Højlund, and I don't think he's the kind of player who likes to run in behind the fences. He's relatively quick, but he's not Højlund levels quick. Højlund has speed and pace, and so you're like, you kind of have to figure out, well, where do you want him to play it? If you want them to play together, I'm not sure that will work really. So I think he's he's a player who you have to find the right system for, and there's not that many clubs that play with false nines. Probably, I think, Arsenal are in the market for a striker, and I think he'd be a really good fit at Arsenal, actually. But then again, I think the fans there really want like a sort of out-and-out goal scorer, and not that. But if they were to sort of go for a similar profile, similar system to what they already have, I think he'd be almost an upgrade on Kai Havertz, potentially, as a false nine. So I think, for me, it's worth it if you are certain that he fits your system. And I hope that's how the clubs will scout him, and I hope that's what he bases his decision on, because I think that's very important for his future, to find the right club.
Yeah, you look at it and you see and even on Sky Sports had it in the last hour or so that Zirkzee is edging closer to Old Trafford. But like you say, it is a different forward for Højlund, so you can make the argument for a different alternative. But with United's financial issues as well, it seems a lot of money to be paying for someone that's an alternative who you're not going to really put in there. Yeah, it will be interesting to see. It looks like Zirkzee is going to end up at Old Trafford, nothing certain yet. It will be one to keep an eye on. Yeah, so I think me and Ben are the same. A talented player has certain attributes. Right for Manchester United right now, a different discussion altogether. But we're going to stay Old Trafford for the final one, Ben. I won't say it came from nowhere, but it surprised a lot of people. This Manuel Ugarte, the Uruguayan PSG, defensive midfielder. It's probably wrong to call him a holding midfielder like a six. He is more Kante, he is sort of all-action, physical in that regard. There was no real links with this before, Ben. But then all of a sudden, L'Équipe and quite a few others reported that United had a bid rejected for the player. So we've got to put him front and centre, and we've got to discuss him in this regard. I mean, on the surface, great at Sporting Lisbon, really seemed to struggle when he came to PSG, and which is almost, people will argue, a lesser league in that term. I know people are going to say PSG, Champions League, but in terms of the opposition he's facing week in, week out, you would argue Portuguese league is stronger. So there's that maybe to discuss. Physically, there might be things to like, but rather than just and ah it, what do the metrics actually say about Ugarte as a Premier League player?
They would seem to suggest he's a defensive monster, really. That's the best way to describe it. So first I looked at FBref, 99th percentile for tackles, 96th percentile for interceptions. So you got to bear in mind he wasn't a regular at PSG, so it's a short sample size. But then I went to Y-Scout to sort of dive deeper into the stats, and I remember I wrote about him before as well. And his numbers last season, well, the season before last, in the Portuguese top flight, seemed to sort of reflect those numbers that he's been doing on a short sample in Ligue 1. He actually averaged more possession-adjusted interceptions and successful defensive actions out of midfielders in Portugal's top flight than anyone else.
Wow.
So he's very defensive orientated. He's very good when it comes to sniffing out danger. He is just, really strong in all of those areas. I think the comparison to Conte is a good one. He's great. He excels at breaking up play, but at the same time, like, he's good on the ball. He's technically gifted. He'll look to progress the ball, and he's quite effective at doing that as well. So all in all, I'm to be honest, I'm surprised that PSG want to get rid of him. I find it a strange one that he hasn't quite settled or hasn't sort of found his home in PSG yet. I'm not quite sure why, because I'm a big fan of the player. I think he's really talented. Obviously, still fairly young as well. So he's got time to sort of his critics, his doubters wrong at PSG. And I think he is the type of player who Man United sort of need right now. The midfield under Ten Hag, like, anyone's been able to sort of slice through it like a knife through butter, really. And you need someone to solidify it and make it a little bit harder. And I think Ugarte is that type of profile.
Does seem to fit perfectly for them, doesn't he? I mean, we've seen United so many times. It's been analysed this season. Huge gaps in the whole formation to start with, spaces between the midfield and the other areas. So you close that up, you put Ugarte in there as well, it all of a sudden looks far, far more solid. You'd expect those chances, the United to concede, those numbers to come tumbling. I mean, I was going to ask you about that, Ben, because you mentioned it. It's probably a bit of a surprise for me. United came in, and obviously we don't know exactly, but as the reports say, they've had a bid rejected. Are you surprised, or maybe thinking that now even this is coming out, are you thinking other Premier League clubs, because of his style, may just think, hold on, whether we knew this player was available or not, this is one for us to look at?
I think so. I think they shouldn't be put off by the fact that it didn't work out at PSG. There's talented players, and sometimes things just don't work out. It doesn't mean he's not a good player. I think Nuri Sahin is probably the best example of a terrible Liverpool, but he was brilliant at Borussia Dortmund. I think, it's just one of those things. And we've seen time and time again imports from the Portuguese league. When you do well there, you're likely to do well in the Premier League as well. Over the last sort of, I would say, 5 years, that's backed up time and time again. I think maybe some years ago, the sort of development league for the Premier League would have been the Eredivisie or a division like that, which was also very strong at the time. But now, I think the Portuguese league has overtaken it, and that's where you go for value for money and get some really talented players. And I think Ugarte is one of those. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's not just Manchester United to go for him, because like the sort of holding midfield or these kind of like defensive midfielders, that market is very scarce, and there's not a lot of players in the market. And he's always been a sort of standout player over the last 2 years, if you look at how he's been performing. So I think he's already on the short list of clubs. He was definitely on the short list of clubs last season, and there'll be clubs who have been disappointed to have missed out on him, might now think, well, actually, we'll still take a punt, and this time around you might not even have to pay as much as PSG had to do last summer.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. But if you look at the details that came out, PSG activated that release clause, didn't they? £51 million all in all. So release clause is naturally not going to be one single bit of an issue for some clubs like PSG. Suspicion is, according, if you read the reports, that PSG would be happy to get their money back, maybe take a little less in that regard as well. That is what all the reports suggest. I mean, Ben, if you can get it, we have to accept it's not been the greatest of seasons for Ugarte, so that may damage his brand slightly. But if you could get a player with his potential and quality for somewhere between 45 million or just shy of 50, shall we say, do you think there will be takers in the Premier League?
Absolutely. I think he's a fantastic player, and I think there will be. especially because there are actually quite a few clubs who need that sort of profile, not just Man United. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, interesting ones there for this week, ladies and gents. We're saying Calvert-Lewin. Most clubs are wise like Newcastle. He will stay where he is, although he'll have only a year left, so we'll see what Everton do. We said Jonathan David. We will be very surprised if someone does not take the gamble for 25 to 30 million. Lille are looking to sell, as we know. It feels like Premier League written all over it. Joshua Zirkzee seems to, by all accounts, be inching ever closer to Old Trafford. We have a few question marks about the suitability of that, as the metrics say, but we may find that out soon enough. One that we do not have any doubts, though, I think it's pretty unanimous. Yes, it's not been the greatest of seasons for Manuel Ugarte, but at somewhere between 45 to 50 million would be a great addition for maybe not only the engine room at Old Trafford, a few more in the Premier League. So there you go, ladies and gents. We expect some moves. Everyone expects some moves, don't they, as things hot up? We get closer to the start of July. The transfer window's open. The Euros is in full swing. Nations, importantly, will start to be knocked out, so player movements can start again. But all it leaves me to say is, as ever, Ben, thanks for the time and the insight, mate. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed it. I think there's some really interesting players to talk about, and I'm sort of very excited because I think now the transfer window is actually going to sort of start to speed up as we get towards the end of the Euros, and the Copa America will soon sort of edge nearer towards the end as well with the group stages. So I think sooner or later, pre-season started for most clubs as well.
Yeah,
we're going to have a lot more to talk about throughout the summer.
Yeah, stuff feels like it's starting to ramp up, ladies and gents. And from us, and from everyone at the EPL Index, that was another Transfer Market Metrics.
Sports Social Podcast Network.